In the last video, we spoke about how we have two really big issues inside of our current sorting algorithm. So we need to design this thing to work equally well for an array of numbers and a string as well. We also need to make sure everything works as with a linked list too, but we'll worry about that in the future. Right now, we're just concerned about an array of numbers and sorting a string. So the two big issues we ran into was that we had one expression right here that's going to work just fine with an array of numbers, but if we try to use this comparison with a string, we're probably not going to get the result we expect. Because remember, if we are dealing with uppercase and lowercase characters, the sorting order that we're going to get by using this comparison right here is probably not going to be what we expect. In addition, this comparison right here, or excuse me, this swapping logic works out very well with an array of numbers, but it doesn't work at all if we have a string. We cannot do index assignment to a string because in JavaScript, and therefore TypeScript as well, strings are immutable. So we need to figure out some way of solving this issue so that our algorithm works just as well with an array of numbers as a string. So as usual, as we've seen several times in this course so far, we're going to first take a bad approach to solving this issue. The reason we're taking a lot of bad approaches here in kind of like the initial take on all these problems is because I think that a lot of these bad approaches that we're looking at are some ways of solving things that a new engineer might decide to try. So I'm going to show you a solution here that is not good that I think you might try on your own if you were writing this code. Now, I'm not saying that you're like a bad engineer at all. Honestly, I would try to use the same solution as what I'm about to show you when I was first getting started with TypeScript. So I'm just showing you these bad solutions to help you from falling into these pitfalls that you might otherwise have to deal with on your own. Okay, so again, we're going to look at a bad solution first. I'm going to very distinctly tell you when we start doing a refactor over to our good code. So here's how we could possibly solve this. I think maybe inside of our for loop right here, we have some logic that is only good for an array of numbers. So maybe we should do something like this. Maybe we should say, we're only going to run that logic right there if collection is an array of numbers. So if we know that we are working with an array of numbers, great. Run the logic that we know works perfectly with an array of numbers. We've already ran this. We know it can sort an array perfectly. So then after that, maybe we could put in another block down here. And we can say if collection is a string, do this logic instead. And then down here, we can write out some logic to compare and swap characters in a string. So then the problem just comes into figuring out what type collection is. The first thing we would probably want to do here is update the annotation on collection and say, hey, collection can be either an array of numbers or a string. So I'm going to add that in like so. Remember, we took a look at this syntax in the last application we worked on. This is the OR operator, or more precisely, the union operator. So it means that collection can be either an array of numbers or a string. Now there's a very big implication by using this OR operator right here, and I just want to review what it did on our last application to us. Okay, so just a quick review on what that or the union operator really does. So remember on the last application, we were working on that mapping stuff, and we tried using that OR operator on a company and a user. So this is a diagram of all the different properties that a company had and their types, and all the different properties that a user had and their types as well. When we use that union operator, TypeScript behind the scenes is going to restrict the properties that we can access on the resulting type. So in other words, TypeScript is going to look at each of these different types and say, you can only access the different properties that are common to both of them. So TypeScript, we look at company name right here, and it would say, okay, does both a company and a user have a company name? Nope, they don't, so that is not allowed to be accessed on the resulting type from the union operator right here. It would then look at catchphrase. It would say, okay, do both types have catchphrase? Nope, okay, not allowed. Do both types have name? Nope, not allowed. Do both types have location that is an object with a latitude and longitude that are numbers? Yep, okay, resulting type, you are allowed to access location. Again, this is what we saw on that last project. And so that same mechanic is going to apply here as well. We just applied the union operator to collection, and that means that now on collection inside of this class, we can only access properties on collection that are common to both an array of numbers and a string. Now, why is that relevant? Well, it turns out that when we use this union operator, there's a little bit deeper comparison going on than just the different properties. Okay? So first, let's try referencing this dot collection like inside of sort really quickly. I'm just going to write out this dot collection and then dot like so. So you're going to see a list of properties right here that are common to both an array of numbers and a string. So there are definitely more properties that belong to an array of numbers. There are definitely more properties that belong to an array of strings, but we are only seeing the ones common to both of them. But like I said, there are actually some other comparisons going on here than just those different methods. Remember, whenever we work with an array, we can do direct index access on an array and update an element inside of it. But as we just saw, that is not allowed with a string. So you'll notice we are now getting an error down here. And the error says, index signature in type string and array of numbers only permits reading. So this right here is an error message that we're getting that is entirely relevant to this union operator stuff. Let me show you a diagram to really help you understand why we are seeing this error message around these two lines. Okay, so similar diagram, but this time we're going to look at a union between a string and an array of numbers. So like we just mentioned, when we use the union operator, Typescript is going to look at all the different properties of the first type and the second type, and it's going to make sure that we only can access properties that are present on both. Strings and array of numbers, or arrays in general, have a ton of different properties, but in this diagram, I've just written out a couple of different properties just to make this comparison a little bit easier. So Typescript is going to say, okay, do both these types have a toUpperCase function? Well, a string does, but an array of numbers does not, so we are not allowed to access that. Do both have a toLowerCase function? Well, string has that, but number does not, so that goes away. And then Typescript looks at what arrays can do. Can strings have a push method? Nope. How about can strings have a pop method? Nope. So we just went through all the different properties and essentially weeded out we narrowed down to only the common properties. And like I said, now the comparison goes a little bit deeper. And Typescript starts to check the different features or syntax that are allowed around both of these types as well. So Typescript is 100% aware that we can update values inside of an array by using that index notation. Typescript knows that we can do this kind of thing right here with an array. Typescript knows that we can reference the array, find a particular index, and then update the value at a particular index. But Typescript is really smart, and it knows that strings do not support that. Typescript knows that we cannot index into a string and update a value there. And so we are not allowed to do that with the result of a union operator between a string and a number. And so knowing that actually makes this error message a little bit more obvious in what it's trying to say here. So this error message is really saying, if you are going to use that index access notation, like these square brackets, on the union of string and array of numbers, you can only read values. And remember, we just saw that in the last video. In the last video, we just saw, remember I wrote out that code at my terminal. Right here, like I made that string color that was red. We saw that we can get index access into a string to read a value, but we cannot use it to update a value. And Typescript knows that, and that's exactly what we are seeing here. So this is just a quick aside, not super related to what we are doing here. I just want to explain to you why we are seeing this error message and help you really start to get some behind-the-scenes sense of what is going on. Okay, so now that we see this, well, the approach that we're going to try to take here of trying to check if we have a collection that is an array of numbers and trying to see if a collection is a string, this approach is still going to work. But I just wanted you to understand the step, because once we start to add in this kind of type checking step right here, this little if statement to make sure we are working with an array of numbers, you're actually going to see this error message go away. And I wanted you to understand this error message so that you will understand in just a moment why that message is going to go away as well. So quick pause, then we're going to come into part 2 and start adding in some type checking here. So I'll see you in just a minute.